WHO has to say about COVID-19, and it says that it is a mild illness. Okay, and it makes very few people very ill, and very, very rarely the disease can be fatal. And I'm sure all of us have come across a lot of warnings that people who are elderly, people with other comorbid conditions like high blood pressure, heart diseases, or diabetes, they appear to have more problem with this particular infection. Then why are we so scared? Because of COVID-19, the entire world has kind of come to a standstill, and that is because of these kind of numbers and the global spread that we are looking at. I was just looking at the John Hopkins website, which is kind of keeping a track of the kind of infection coronavirus has brought in across the world. And if we look at the entire world now, it is all painted red. All the red dots are representing the areas that are affected by COVID-19, and there is hardly a spot left. And we know by now that there are huge number of people who are affected. They are confirmed to be diagnosed with COVID-19, and over 5 lakh people have already died across the world. Now, but then, is this the biggest healthcare challenge that we have had ever? Probably not. When we look at the causes of deaths, and I just showed you that about 5 lakh people have died of corona, approximately 9 to 10 million people die of ischemic heart diseases every year. Stroke causes about 6 million people to die every time. And then there is cancer, there is COPDs, and whole range of other disorders which are there. And when we look at the causative factors or the risk factors which causes the deaths across the world, once again, if we look at this picture, it will show you that high blood pressure causes more than 10 million people to die every year. Smoking, high blood sugar, high body mass index, that is obesity, outdoor air pollution, alcohol use, and the list goes on and on. Even today, when we're talking of COVID-19, we talk of how your immune system should be strong to fight this particular virus. And we also understand that our immune system is dependent on our lifestyle. And therefore, if we introspect and see what are these big challenges that we have and why are they there and what is the solution when it is to do with the healthcare, it appears to be very, very simple. My lifestyle is the most important problem that we have. Okay, and when I say lifestyle, I would broadly categorize them into 6 categories. The bad food habits that all of us are subjected to, lack of physical exercise, the sedentary lifestyle that all of us are involved in, then the environmental pollution, the stress and addictions, and overall this whole bunch together contributes to wrong lifestyle. And what we understand is if our lifestyle is better, then probably we are not just going to take care of ourselves from corona, but also we are going to deal with the whole range of other diseases that can possibly be fatal to us. We can largely prevent them. But unfortunately, the healthcare sector is doing what is wrong with this particular picture. Instead of closing the tap, we are just wiping the floor. All the disorders that I have listed as the major cause of death, whether it is heart attacks or the high blood pressure or blood sugar or obesity, or all those problems are largely preventable if I modify my lifestyle. But what are we doing? We are rather investing a large number of budgetary allocation to the energy, to a lot of resources into discovering wonder drugs for diabetes and hypertension and all other health problems. But can we not simply modify our lifestyle and make ourselves healthy? And that is the whole topic that we are going to discuss today. We are going to talk about what should be our lifestyle, whether it is COVID-19, where we are talking of stronger immune system and how do I make sure that I'm remaining healthy in the given situation, or fighting all the other diseases that we are suffering with in the 21st century. Before we jump into what should be done, we need to understand what is defined as health according to the World Health Organization. Largely, there is a misinterpretation that I am healthy if I don't have a physical health problem. But then, by the definition of the WHO, health is a state of well-being at physical, mental, social, and spiritual levels, and not merely absence of disease. And therefore, it is not just lack of illness, but health is a process of wellness. And what we are going to discuss today is how do we go in the path of wellness. I was just browsing some pictures just to make the slides more interesting, and came across these two beautiful pictures over there. Uh, the evolution of Americans. Obesity was generally considered as an urban problem because of the Western lifestyle, where there is a lot of junk that we eat and there is sedentary lifestyle. But today, in the Western world, there is so much of emphasis on better lifestyle. There is, in fact, American College of Lifestyle Medicine, which has opened recently. And what are we emphasizing on? We are emphasizing on yoga, we are emphasizing on physical health, physical activity. We are talking about doing a lot of relaxation or meditation, having better food habits and all of that. Now, unfortunately, yoga originated in India, and there recent times there are Americans who are coming back to India and teaching Indians yoga, and that is what we need to change. This has been our heritage, and we need to propagate not just yoga but a healthy lifestyle. So when I talk of holistic health, which is the title of my topic, I'm not just talking of the physical well-being, but there are other dimensions to my discussion to health. That is the mental well-being, the emotional well-being. How am I in harmony in my society? Whether I have a component of spirituality in what I do every day, and is my lifestyle aligned to healthy lifestyle or an ill-healthy one? So we will start talking of those. But before that, once again, I want to draw your attention to something that yoga talks about. Yoga understands human personality not getting limited to the physical self, but rather it gives these sheets of existence, which are the physical body, the vital energy that keeps us alive, the mind and emotions, the intellect that all human beings have, and at the end, we'll all live because we want to be happy. And happiness is the cause of our existence. And therefore, whatever activity we get involved in, they're essentially for getting happiness. And therefore, when I look at human personality, and this particular concept comes from one of the Upanishads called Taittiriya Upanishad, it talks of how human personality is a mixture of the physical being, the vital energy, the emotions and the intelligence, as well as the happiness and bliss that all of us have. And therefore, whenever we are talking of health, we will have to talk about being healthy at each of these levels. So starting with the physical well-being, when do we call ourselves physically healthy? When we are free from sickness, when our body is young, we are fit to do activities, and we are flexible enough to do a lot of things. And the physical health works on these aspects: the food, the right kind of food or wrong kind of food, the physical activity, getting rid of bad habits, and of course we will talk a little more on stress management when we talk of mental well-being. But we also understand that The physical health is also dependent on the amount of emotional well-being that we have. There is an intricate relationship between the body and mind, and if you are stressed at the mental level, that is definitely going to reflect on the physical level. There are whole range of psychosomatic disorders that we talk about, and therefore even if you want to be healthy at the physical level, you will have to take care of your emotions. So we will now jump in and talk about each one of them in little more elaborate manner. Uh, if we look at the research that has happened world over, what we understand is every time we open our mouth to eat something, we are either fighting a disease or feeding it. Food is the single most important factor that determines if you are going towards a healthy lifestyle or a diseased one. And therefore, we need to understand what we should be eating, when we should be eating, how should we be eating, and all that. And therefore, I have a set of slides that I would like to show you about healthy eating habits. So when do we eat? Typically when we eat when we are hungry, but we don't limit our eating to only hunger. Rather, we eat when we are happy, we eat when we are sad or depressed, and there are events and get-togethers and parties which unfortunately are not happening in the COVID-19 situation, but then we eat in all those get-togethers as well. And therefore, we end up eating on any occasion. But when should we actually be eating? We should eat only when we are hungry. No other animal in the world eats without being hungry, even if there is abundant food, except human being. And that is why the number of sicknesses that we have are attributed to the food that we consume. When I say you should be eating when you are hungry, we need to understand what hunger means, and generally there is an associated component of appetite. And I have classified them here. Hunger is the need to eat, the physical need of it. And once you are hungry, you cannot ignore it. You have to eat to satisfy the hunger. And it is generally time dependent, gradual onset. There is a biological clock set in our hypothalamus in the brain, and that essentially takes care that the time at which we are supposed to eat, it will tell us that you start feeling hungry. Your stomach will start grumbling when it is lunchtime. But then appetite on the other side is more the desire to eat for sensory gratification. And it can actually be ignored, but we tend to not ignore it. And it is very rapid. The moment you see an ice cream or a cake, you start feeling the urge to eat it. Okay? And it is not time dependent. It is also persistent even after you eat stomach full, which is not the case with hunger. Hunger can be satisfied by any kind of food. When you're hungry, you can eat anything. In our naturopathy setups, when people are made to do fasting, they're even happy eating, the bland food that we give them because they're really, really hungry there. But it is not the case with appetite. We need the specific food for which our senses are asking for. The demand is for a specific food, and unless I get it, I will not be satisfied. If I have to put very simply, hunger represents your whole body's need for food. Appetite represents the need of your tongue for food. And our problem is that for the 1.5 inches of tongue to ratify the taste that we wish to have, we spoil the remaining whole body. And therefore, it is also pictorially shown in this particular cartoon here. This is a stomach which is already full, and it is saying, I can't really eat a pie. But then the mind is a problem where it says, you can and you will eat it. You end up eating that, and therefore there is a problem. And therefore, the first take-home message today is eat only when you are hungry. The second thing that I would like to talk about is the timings of the food. Typically, in naturopathy and yoga perspective, what we say is the most ideal meals are 2 meals a day. You should have a kind of a brunch at about 10:30, 11, and you should have your dinner by about 6:37, and give a gap of about 16 hours between your two major meals. But then we go to work, and it is probably not possible for us to follow that kind of a lifestyle. And therefore, if you are having 3 meals a day, your breakfast should become the most important meal of the day. Now, a very simple way of putting it is, if you want to be the man on the right side, your breakfast should be the volume that is shown here. And typically, that is not how it is. Typically, breakfast is the smallest meal, the most hurried meal that we have, and the dinner is the most leisurely meal and the largest meal that we have. So, if I have to put it in a simple term, have breakfast like a king, your lunch like a commoner, and dinner like a beggar, and then you will really be healthy. There is a big journal called Circulation, which is a publication of American Heart Association, and there was a study that came in, which was a 16-year-long study, which followed about 27,000 males in European population between the age 45 to 82 years. And what was seen was people who skipped their breakfast had 27% higher risk of developing heart disease and death due to coronary heart diseases. And people who ate late at night had 55% higher risk of developing coronary heart diseases. And therefore, the timings of your meal are extremely important. Why is it so? That is because your digestive system is more like a machine, and unless you give rest to the machine, it is going to break down. And therefore, there has to be an ideal gap between meals, and while you sleep, again the digestion will not happen, and therefore you should eat at least about 2 to 3 hours prior to you going to bed. Typically dinners are like that. The whole family is together, everybody is leisurely and all of that, but it should not be this way. It should rather be the opposite, where it is light and early. Also, how do you eat? You're supposed to drink the solids and eat the liquids. This is a very famous statement that we keep telling our patients all the time. Why drink the solids? You should chew your food in your mouth so much that it gets mixed with saliva, and the digestion of your food would start in your mouth itself. And when you are taking the liquids as well, don't just gulp them. Rather, have them in a manner that you will have your solid food, so that you can feel the taste of the food as much in your mouth, and your brain also gets satisfied. Now, when you're eating, the right proportion of the quantity of food is considered to be the half of your food should be filled with the solid food, 1/4 with liquids, and 1/4 should be left empty. Now, why is that? Again, it is like your stomach works like a mixer grinder, and while you put things in a mixie, you don't really stuff things fully. You actually leave some space for it to churn things and squeeze things. And the problem here is that we don't have a window to open your abdomen and see if 1/4 of it is empty, and therefore you should always stop eating just before you start feeling full. And that is the way we should start eating. Also, eat as though you are offering to please the God. And be it any religion, offering prayers before food has been a tradition, and that is because your mood has to be good when you are eating. If you are in a stressful situation, that is not when the food gets digested. The autonomic nervous system in our body has sympathetic and parasympathetic divisions. Whenever we are stressed, the sympathetic nervous system is more active, but the parasympathetic nervous system is the one that is responsible for rest and digest. And when we pray, when we are calm, when our mind is comfortable, then automatically, naturally, we are going to digest our food better. How not to eat? I think the pictures tell you a lot. You should not be rushing through the food. You should not be multitasking when you are having food. And unfortunately, one of the things that has happened during COVID is that people have ended up doing what this third person on the extreme right of the slide is doing. They are binge eating, but that is not how you should be eating. Rather, how should you be eating? Do not hurry when you are having food. Feel the taste of the food. Do not just gulp it. Eat in this way. You should be happy and comfortable in pray before you start eating. No multitasking. A lot of us have now television, the idiot box is replaced by the smartphones in our hand. That should not be done when we are eating, so that you're rather more mindful of what you're eating. Respect your body and health when you're eating. It is also said in the yogic understanding that the mood of the person who is cooking also gets transferred to the food, and therefore cook and eat in a good mood. That also will tell you that you should not be eating outside much, because you don't really have control on what is the mood of the person who is cooking in a hotel, and therefore eat at home, and that is probably the best for you. You can use music to further relax you. Sit on a real table, and when I say real table, people would say, in yoga you ask people to sit on floor and eat, and here you're telling to sit on a table. What I mean is sit down. In Bangalore, we have these yoga darshinis where people stand and eat. That is not how you should be eating. Sit down peacefully, be with your food when you are eating it, and not indulge into rushing through your food just because you have an appointment or something like that. And another very important tip about how you should be eating is eat your favorite food at the end. Now, there are two reasons to it. Number one, if you start your food with your favorite food, you will end up eating that a little more, and generally the favorite food is an unhealthy one. Okay, and therefore we would end up eating a lot of unhealthy stuff. Second, when we end the food with the favorite one, you will be able to relish the taste of the food for a longer time, and therefore eat the favorite food at the end. What you should be eating, something that is seasonal and regional is always best for you, because that is how nature has created it. You should have a balanced food. It should have all the components that are really required. It should be least processed. The more you process food, it becomes bad for you. And I would definitely recommend vegetarian or vegan food, and I'll elaborate on that in a couple of slides further. So when I say balanced food, you should have the 5 major components that you receive for keeping your body healthy. That is the carbohydrates, protein, fats, vitamins, and minerals. So that is how your plate should look like. It should look colorful, because the moment you have multiple colors in your food, then, and that is not by adding colors, but the natural color of the food. Once you have different colors, you are going to have micronutrients that are really required to either prevent diseases or fight them, and therefore you should have balanced diet. One of the biggest battles every time I talk about food is whether you should be having vegetarian or non-vegetarian food. And when we look at the biology of human being, structurally we are by nature more similar to a herbivorous animal than a carnivore. We have the jaws, which are very similar to probably animals like cow. The digestive enzymes are very similar to that. The length of intestines, we have a very long intestine, and therefore if the food, non-vegetarian food, stays longer in our body, that is going to start getting putrefied, and that is going to create problems. Of course, there are also moral uh, dimension to it. There is also a big problem with the poultry and dairy industry, where the malpractices such as injecting hormones to antibiotics to a lot of malpractices are happening with those industries, and therefore a better thing to do is to turn vegetarians. The moment I say that, people would say, vegetarians probably will not get the amount of energy that is really required, and they may lack some abilities in life. But then there are many people who are really vegetarians and they are excelling in their lives. Our honorable prime minister, he is a vegetarian. You may like or dislike his policies, but then what you need to definitely agree upon is, for last 6.5 years, he has not taken a single day's break. He travels extensively. He works for about 18 hours a day. And the secret of his energy is the food that he consumes and the yoga that he does. We have somebody from sporting fraternity. We have Virat Kohli, Djokovic, and Serena Williams and Venus Williams. All these people undergo very rigorous physical training. And if you don't know, Djokovic is a vegan. Serena and Venus Williams are also vegetarians. You have Lewis Hamilton, who is one of the best Formula One racers who have been ever in the Formula One history. And this is a race where 1 millisecond of your judgment can kill you. But then he's also able to cope up being a vegan. We have Amitabh Bachchan, who is fighting a lot of liver injury that has happened because of the hepatitis, and he's also a vegetarian and still able to act at his age with that kind of mastery. So there are people from all walks of life, and these are just representative uh, names and people, but there are people from all walks of life who are vegetarians and vegans, and they're able to do their activities with an optimal level. So if you turn vegetarians or vegans, it is going to boost your energy levels, it is going to control your weight, it is part of healthy diet, it is low in sodium and calories, and therefore it can prevent obesity and high blood pressure. It will help you to look and feel great and protect you from chronic diseases. So there are several reasons for us to choose a better food habit over something that is not so good. Of course, fasting is another area which is extremely well researched today. We are also talking of how fasting can be done intermittently. In 2016, the Nobel Prize of Medicine was given to a Japanese scientist for his work in fasting. And across religions, again, fasting had been a common practice. And what is it? It is voluntary abstinence from any food that requires digestion. It is not that you are not going to eat certain things and you're going to eat a lot more other things, but rather you will not be eating anything. And mind you, these practices that I am telling you are for somebody who is healthy and who wants to remain healthy. If there are certain health issues and you want to do fasting, it must be done under supervision. Okay, but there are several researches which tell us that it is going to help you to prevent diabetes, improve focus and cognitive abilities, supports a healthy heart, prevents neurodegeneration, so preventing Alzheimer's to Parkinsonism and other health problems. It fights inflammation, improves digestive abilities, provides a fast weight loss as well, improves the cholesterol level. So there are several reasons for us to undergo fasting, and ideally as a part of healthy lifestyle, I would say once in a week you should go for fasting. Okay, and that is what Probably the last slide that I have also would have that. Switching from food to another major aspect which determines if we are healthy or not, the physical exercise. And there are three kinds of physical exercises: the isometric, isotonic, and resistance exercises. Isometric exercises are the exercises where the length of the muscles do not change, like yoga or stretching. So these are slow exercises where you reach a final position and maintain that position for long. The other one is isotonic exercise where the muscle length keeps changing, okay, and the tone remains the same. And these are the exercises that we're talking in general about aerobics, or walking, or cycling or swimming and all of that. And then there is third kind of exercise, which is resistance exercise, which is you use push-ups, pull-ups, dumbbells, weights, etc. So these are the major categories of exercises that are there out. How much should you exercise? The World Health Organization recommends a minimum of 150 minutes per week of exercise for an individual to remain healthy and to prevent chronic degenerative disorders. And that amounts to about 30 minutes per day for 5 days a week. But optimally, you should be exercising 45 minutes to 1 hour every single day. Exercise should become a part of your lifestyle, just the way you brush or take bath every day. The day you don't brush, or you are not able to take bath, how do you feel? You feel that something is missing. Exercise should become that kind of a part of your lifestyle. The day you do not exercise, you should start feeling uneasy. And once we have that, naturally we are going to be able to prevent diseases and remain healthy. What would happen if I exercise? One, there is a lot of physical changes that happen, but my immune system gets stronger, my weight remains in control, and also when I exercise, I become happy. Okay, so there are different hormones that are secreted in our brain that keeps us happy when we exercise. And more or less, we know that exercising is good for us. Only thing is, we are probably a little lazy to start, but we should start doing it right away. When should you exercise? One, you should be having empty stomach. So ideally, early morning is the best time for you to exercise. But sometimes, you're rushing to college, you're doing some activities or something like that. Then you should have a gap of minimum 2 hours from meals to exercise. Now, why is that? Because when we have meals, the blood supply is deviated to our digestive system. And when we exercise, the blood supply is required by the muscles, and therefore the digestion will not be proper if we are exercising soon after food. And therefore there has to be a gap between the food and exercise. So how do you exercise? When I said about 45 minutes of exercise, you should warm up for 10 minutes, maintain the warmed body for about 15 to 20 minutes, and then you should cool down for about 10 minutes. That is the ideal manner in which you start doing exercises. So that is about physical health. Of course, what I have not put in slides is leaving the bad habits, because that is also part of the mental health as well. But we know that smoking is bad. We know that alcohol is bad for health, and therefore we should not be indulging into anything that is a habit forming substance. And when I say habit forming substance, that also includes tea or coffee. To an extent, it is fine, but we do not really have that control on what is good for me and what is bad for me, and therefore better avoid those things rather than getting indulged on the addictions. Moving on to mental health, and this particular scenario is very, very important, because We are in a situation of lockdown, people are in isolation. There is so much of instability around us. There is economy is going down, and unfortunately, it's not only small people, even big actors are falling for it. One of my favorite movies in recent times was Chichore, which was made on how you can prevent suicide. And the lead actor of it, a couple of weeks back, we came with an unfortunate news that he committed suicide. So we don't really know who is having an unstable mind at this point, and therefore it is all the more important to have good relationships. It is all the more important that we take care of our stress levels. We get in an activity where we are able to manage our stress well, and therefore today's life is going to be the key for us. You know, we make a choice whether we want to be stressed out or stress free, and that is where we thankfully to COVID, I think there is so much of importance to relationships. I have myself called a lot of my relatives whom I had not spoken to for ages, a lot of my friends, because I had time during lockdown, and now I understand that there is a need to keep in touch. And therefore in mental health, all of us require to do that. Also, as people in education, there is a lot of mentoring that we need to do for our students, and that is a part and parcel of the academic stress that students face. It is our job as teachers to take care of it, and therefore mental health is going to be the key to remain healthy, whether it is COVID-19 or otherwise. Why is it that we need to manage the mind? Because it is the seat of stress and conflicts. Typically, we know what is right, but we perform otherwise. I have put a picture of a very famous character from the epic Mahabharata. This person is Duryodhana, and he goes on record in Mahabharata that he knows what is dharma. He knows what is the virtue, what is the right thing for him to do, but he doesn't do it. And he knows what he is doing is wrong, but he continues to do so. Now, why do I put that? Because all of us have Duryodhanas in each one of us. We know in first or second standard books, we have studied that eating fruits is good for me, and eating something that is fried and stale and open is bad for me. But if there are two shops right next to each other, one is a chaat shop and another fruit shop, 90% of the times people are going to go to the chaat shop and not go to the fruit shop. And that is because we know what is right, we don't do it. We know physical exercise is good for me, but I'm lazy. Okay, so knowing things and doing otherwise is part and parcel of the way the mind and intelligence have this conflict all the time. Every smoker, for that matter, knows that smoking is bad, but they are so much into the habit of it, so much of craving is there, and therefore the mind must be managed. Okay, and therefore if you want to be healthy, you need to give a lot of importance on mind management. The other areas is today's world, we are in a competitive world, we are constantly facing criticism, there is lack of confidence, there is so much of negativity, there is so much of stress that we are subjected to. And therefore, if you want to take care of all these attributes that are going to create so much of negative environment around us, we will have to put our thoughts about mind management together. So what do? We do a lot of activities that can work for us. Understand that everybody's mind is going to be different, and what would relax me may not relax you, and therefore there can be multiple ways in which we will be able to manage our mind. Yoga and meditation, in fact, yoga and meditation are separated in the West, they are together in India because we understand that meditation is part and parcel of yoga. They have been proven beyond doubt. There have been lots and lots of studies which demonstrate to us convincingly that yoga and meditation are going to help us to manage our stress very well. The hobbies that we can be part of again can help you to manage your stress. Exercising, as I said, produces happy hormones in our brain and help you to manage stress. Uh, Getting in tune with nature, uh, greenery will again help you a lot. Time management, a lot of times one uh, major source of stress is that we are unable to manage time well. And if we are able to manage the time well, we can be able to manage the stress levels very well. Music can help a lot of people, but if that is not helping, then probably therapies are also there. Psychotherapy is there, you have CBT, you have several other things which can help you. But one thing that we need to understand is that it is not that I do one session of yoga and I'll be stress free from my life. Okay, I go one time in jungle and I will be stress free forever. It has to be persistently practiced every time, and therefore perseverance, sticking on to this, is going to be very, very important. Something that is not there in this slide is the relationships. How are you relating yourself with society is again something that will help you to manage your stress levels very, very well. Something that always, whenever we talk of stress, reminds me of this particular picture. You can either be mindful or your mind can always be full in a given situation. There is this man walking with his dog in a place where there are trees and there are a beautiful sunrise or sunset. The dog is just looking at the situation. The man sitting there is thinking about a whole lot of things. We are stressed because we are either dwelling in our past or future. And if we want to remain stress-free, we will have to start living in present, live mindfully, take conscious decisions of our life. Once we start doing that, automatically the stress levels are going to go down. Okay, so that is another very, very important attribute to being stress-free. Of course, there are other ways of doing it as well. Pranayama, there are several ways that you can work with your breathing. My own doctoral work, the PhD work, has been on pranayama, and I understand that the physical body and the mind is very much connected to the way we breathe. And this is brought out beautifully by the shloka from Hatha Yoga Pradipika, which says, Chale vate chalam chittam nischale nischalam bhave, which means if my breath is moving, my mind also flows. And if I want to control my mind, if I want to regulate the thought process, all I need to do is regulate the way I breathe. Also, looking at it from the neurophysiological perspective, what we understand is there are these two divisions in our nervous system. One, the voluntary nervous system. I am making gestures, I am talking to you. This is under my control. But there are several things beyond my control. My heart is beating as I am talking to you. There is digestion happening in my body as I am talking to you. And all of that is not under my control. And that is what is autonomic nervous system controlling. Now, breathing or the respiratory system is the only system in human body that is forming the bridge between the autonomic nervous system and the voluntary nervous system. Unless you take charge of your breathing, it happens automatically. You don't really realize that you have been breathing. But if you really want to, you can control the way you breathe. If I ask you to breathe slowly or breathe fast, you can do that as well. And the moment we are stressed, our breathing becomes haphazard, it becomes rapid. So the reverse can easily be done to manage stress. Whenever I am stressed, I just go to a deep abdominal breathing or start doing some pranayama techniques which are very, very useful. And therefore, it is extremely important for us to work with the breathing. Also, just to give you another anecdote for why it is important to regulate breathing, there are two animals demonstrated on the slide. One is the pet animals, generally dogs, which live for about 15-20 years. On the other side is the turtles, which live for a real long time. About a couple of 100 years is the lifespan of a turtle. And one major difference between these two animals is the speed of their breathing. Dogs breathe at a very, very rapid rate. The turtles breathe at a very, very slow rate. Human beings breathe at an intermediate breathing rate, and that is the kind of uh, lifespan that we have. It is in between the dogs and turtles. We live somewhere between 70 to 100 years based on normal life. Okay, and therefore, if you start breathing slowly, you will have a healthy and prolonged life. But is it enough to work on breathing or do some meditation or go to a natural environment? Not really. If you really want to be stress free, you will have to start looking at the meaning for your life. I've put a person on the slide. He's known as the Dr. Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl was Jewish, and he is one of the most famous neuropsychiatrists of his generation. Now, since he was Jewish, during the Second World War, he was captured, his entire family was captured by the Nazis and put in the concentration camp. And he was looking around, his whole family was massacred in front of him, and everybody was depressed, people were dying. The defense of these concentration camps were electrified, and therefore people used to get so depressed that they just used to go and hit those electrical fences and commit suicide. Now, in such a horrifying situation, Viktor Frankl had two options. He could also get depressed because the situation around him was bad, or the second one was he started utilizing his skills as a neuropsychiatrist to counsel people with depression. And he saved thousands of lives, even in that horrible situation. Okay? And he has written this particular his life journey in a book called as Man's Search for Meaning, which is a bestseller. And one particular caption that actually touches my heart very deeply is, if you know the why of living, then how will never be a problem to you. Today, our stress levels are because we are too entangled with how of our life and not why of our life. And therefore, searching and giving purpose to your life, meaning to your life, is going to help you to be healthy, not just physically, but also psychologically. With that, I'm coming to the end of my talk. And if I have to give you a take-home quick review of whatever I have spoken over a period of last about an hour, you should have 2 meals a day, if not 3 meals a day maximum. But more than that, you should avoid. 2 to 3 liters of water drinking every single day will keep you healthy because it will flush all the toxins from the body. Exercise 1 hour per day. Pray twice a day, every day morning. Have gratitude that you are able to see a new day, and every day evening before you go to bed, pray, because be thankful that you have had a wonderful day. And fasting once a week. These are beautiful captions given by Dr. B. Venkat Rao, who happens to be the founder of the naturopathy education system in India. So these are called as Panchatantras, which can keep you healthy and happy throughout your life. So if there are any further questions, I think with that I come to end of my talk. So if there are any specific questions, we will probably